Okay? Oh, good morning.
Good morning.
Very good. Good morning. Welcome to TSS. We are very happy to have all of you here. We have some new faces, some from Brazil and some also who lives in Canada. So I welcome each and every one of you. Oh, my husband is like, what does that mean? Louder. Okay. Can you hear me on the back?
Yeah.
Good. Welcome also to the people who is watching us through live from the web. Welcome to our month of vices and virtues. So today we are going to be talking about the necessity of moral transformation. And we all know that if we are Spiritists, this is what we all aim, right? To be morally transformed and walk in our lives to get this. So we are going to start with a prayer and a reading from Joe, and our speaker of today is Rafael. Thank you so much for coming. Joe?
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm speaking louder than all of you. Good morning.
Good morning.
That's better. So, tough subject. So let's start getting ourselves inspired to discuss what we need to do. So our reading is a short one from the book Happy Life. It's a great little book written by the Spiritist Joana de Angelis and psychographed by our dear friend Givaldo Pereira Franco. When a man decides, or a woman, decides to modify his moral conduct for the better, he seems to face a general conspiracy against his desire for improvement. Everything changes and is out of control. The least little things become complicated, and the rhythm of events changes for the worse for sometimes. This state of affairs leads the person who would improve himself to retreat and give up. Every transference modifies what is usual. In the area of moral actions, the reactions is the greater, because one is penetrating to the root of evil to cut it out. This leads to the growth of new and balanced customs. Do not abandon your goals of morality and inner growth because of the first difficulties you encounter. So with this message of inspiration, let's close our eyes and begin our studies today with a simple prayer to God, our Creator. He who has given us life, love, and the will to improve. Let Him give us the strength to face the challenges of every change that we need to proceed. Let us surround us with the people who can help us in this change. Give us strength. Give us certainty that the path to goodness will lead us closer to Him. Let us thank Jesus Christ, our Master, who is our example to follow, who brought us the lessons and the simple instructions of how we need to change. And finally, let us thank every spirit who is here present today, who are watching us through the internet. Thank you for coming and being part of these few moments in this day that will teach, inspire, and give us the motivation to continue to improve in every day. So be it. Thank you. It is all yours, Rafael. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
So Joe was right when he said that this is a tough subject, the necessity of moral transformation. So there's so many ramifications And I was thinking, what will be the focus that I'm going to give in this speech? I don't think any of us who come here can really teach about moral transformation. This is a challenge that we are all going through. So what we can do is to share our own experiences, our own understanding, to share the inspiration that goes through us in the moment that we are here, we accept to speak, and the teachings that we get from the books of Kardec and all other spirits that have been communicating to us through very special people like Chico Xavier and Divaldo Franco. So when I start thinking about this subject and what will be the focus that I would give, I start thinking in our lives, how we go through our days. And sometimes we forget one of the most precious gifts that we have ever received, the gift to be alive. So we forget that for us to be here today, to be thinking, to be conscious, to be thinking about God, is because He gave us life. And how many times do we remember to give thanks for one more day? Even though sometimes it seems that they come so fast, they come and go so fast every day. So we go through one day, and then when we least expect, there's another day, another morning, wake up, another chance to transform ourselves. And the speed that this goes by makes us kind of hypnotic. We don't even see that we are receiving a new chance every single day. So what I will try to do here is to bring a little bit try to make us all think a little bit more about those chances that we have. In Spiritism, we learn that everything changes. We know that from science too. But in Spiritism, it gives us another piece of information. Everything changes for the better. It's never for the worse. So everything changes. So changes and transformation is part of our lives. It's natural. It's necessary. And since everything transforms and changes for the better, we can use the word evolution or spiritual evolution. All of them are interchangeable. Since we always change for the better, so we can always say that every transformation is also an evolution, either for matter or the spirit. Everything is always changing. And in this dynamic process, what is the meaning of our lives? What is the meaning of us going to the same job every day, driving our car through the same road every day for maybe 30 years, 40 years? What is the meaning of all that? It seems that nothing is going on. We are just hypnotized. But that's not the case. We are always transforming ourselves. Because if you take your car and you go to your job, you're going to interact with other people, other drivers, or people in your office. There will be small problems here, small problems there. So we are always interacting. It seems that nothing is happening, but it is. Every day. Every day we learn something new. So transformation, as I said, is something very natural. And we learn that since the beginning, the very beginning. When we come to this world, when we start our first steps in the spiritual development, we were put in a planet that goes around the sun, so that gives us day and night. So since the beginning, we saw that things change in a very short period of time. So we notice that in the morning, we can see things. During the night, we don't see anything anymore. everything becomes dark, and then comes another day, another night. And we have the seasons. Here in Canada, we see that very clearly. The same landscape changes completely from one season to the other. So this is nature, it's God telling us that everything changes. And how beautiful it is. So we go through fall and we have all the colors in the trees, red, yellow, green. And then comes winter, everything becomes gray. So it is white and gray, white and gray, white and gray. And then comes spring and everything is renewed. Everything is better. So we need those transformations. And we were put in this dynamics, this mechanical interaction of the planets on purpose to tell us that things don't remain the same. Things are meant to change. What happens is we don't want things to change. We want things to stay the same. We want to stay in the same job. We want to stay in the same house. We want to have the same things. Because we don't understand completely that everything has to change, that the transformation is beneficial for us, that's because we suffer. Because we want things to remain the same. And we get attached. We attach to things, to everything. It's very easy. If you work in the same place for 1 year, and then you have to go to another place, you already notice how difficult it is. My office, my little things, my pencil here, my rubber there. So it's very easy for us to get attached. And then when we have to change, we feel kind of an emptiness because we don't accept that we have to change, we have to transform ourselves, and that is very good. This necessity for transformation has been thought about, meditated about, since the very first time that those so-called philosophers came to live among us. So I brought this example from a very old book written in around 360 before Christ by Plato. So the name of this book is Timaeus. If you ever read or heard about alchemy and the four basic elements of alchemy, is alchemy or alchemistry? I think it's alchemy. But then they say fire, water, earth, and air. This comes from this book. So every one of those structures, it has a specific solid, 3D solid. This book was very important until the Middle Ages. So it was studied in the universities. And when I read it, it was very curious that he talks about souls. He talks about spiritual development. And in this passage here, Plato tells us, currently we also have to say, as briefly as possible, that one, the soul, which remains useless and still without moving according to its inner motion, becomes necessarily dull. On the other hand, the one which is exercised becomes full of vigor. So he's already telling us that when we exercise ourselves, when we use our inner force, because even though we don't want to change, we feel that we need to. If we stay all day at home without doing anything, in the beginning it seems nice, because we rest and we see series, we watch TV all day long. But at some point, we start feeling restless, because we need to do something. We have that inside of us, and we need to exercise that. We need to transform ourselves. We need to learn. We need to evolve. That's how we become full of vigor. But when we accept that we need to transform, we need to evolve, we need to learn, we can divide our transformation and our evolution in two main ways: intellectual evolution or intellectual learning and moral development. We don't know why this is the way it is, but that's our nature. We evolve in those two very distinct points. We can see that in our civilization today. We have smartphones. We have all the information of the world in our pockets. We can access it. But if you think about, we still have the Colosseum and the gladiators fights. If you really study the life of the gladiators and who were those fighters, we see that the difference between what we see today is surprisingly very small. Very small. We still have this today. So we see very clearly this separation. We have a very large and very high intellectual development, but the moral development is still lagging behind. We are developing. We are. So now that we have the gladiators, but we don't have the animals eating the gladiators anymore. So that is already a good thing. So then, Kardec, since he realized these two aspects of our nature, our development, he asks the spirits in the Spiritist book, does moral progress always follow intellectual progress? It is its consequence, but it does not always follow immediately. So the consequence of intellectual understanding is the moral development. Why is that? How can intellectual progress lead to moral progress? By making good and evil understandable. That's why we study so much in Spiritism. Because we need to understand that what we are doing is wrong. After we understand, this is an intellectual endeavor. So we understand it makes sense. Then we use that knowledge to try to change ourselves in a way that our acts will agree to what we know is right. Then it starts the internal fight that everyone talks about in the Spiritist books. If our intellect it's not developed enough, so then there is no fight. I do whatever I want and I don't know if that is wrong. But once we know is wrong, then we start fighting to act exactly the way we know is correct. And that is very hard. We know that we need to forgive. We know that the only way for us to be free, to be happy, to be at peace, is to forgive. Every single one of the offenses that are directed to us. So we know that already. That's an intellectual endeavor. We understand, it makes sense. But we still don't do it. That's the difference. So we from the intellectual part, we start our transformation, and little by little we start gaining ground until our intellect agrees with our moral part. So we act exactly the way that we want. And that is the eternal happiness, is the eternal peace. Imagine that every single thing that we say, every single thing that we do, we will never feel any regret. Everything is exactly right. Everything is exactly correct, the way it should be. That is the peace, the eternal peace that Jesus talks to us, that Jesus explained that to us. Our happiness is not from this world. So then we can create this particular diagram or block diagram that explains what happens to us inside of us. First, we see the intellectual knowledge. Someone tells us, or we read somewhere, or we just realize that being angry all the time, for example, it's wrong. Or seeking revenge, it's wrong. It doesn't make me feel better. We think it will, but it doesn't. If someone says something nasty to you somewhere, and you say it back, it doesn't feel better. It feels worse. So that's an intellectual endeavor. Now I know. Then I try to change. Self-knowledge. I understand that. That's my weakness. That is my weak point that I'm going to try to change, to transform. And then I go back to intellectual knowledge. It's a loop here. There's a feedback. I couldn't change that much. Why was that? And I read a little bit more, I study a little bit more, I meditate a little. There's nothing like trying to understand yourself. Try to understand your own actions. Thinking why you feel that way. That's the best way to learn. Why am I feeling fear? Why am I nervous? Why am I so angry today? Self-knowledge. That's loop. And in the middle, there is that knowledge, that thing that we have no idea where it comes from. But it tells us that whatever it is that we are doing is wrong. It's that little voice that we call intuition. So it helps us to understand and to see the right way. We all have that. Nobody's ever alone. Otherwise it wouldn't be any justice in expiation or the sufferings that we go through. So even though sometimes we don't have the intellectual knowledge, we have the intuition. We receive that. But in order for us to listen to that, we need to quiet our minds, which is also something very hard to do. And after this, this process leads to moral transformation and spiritual evolution. So it seems very simple. But it takes hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years. But we are changing every day. So the intellectual part, intellectual knowledge, is the starting point. It is so important that authors like Joana de Angelis, Hamed, André Luiz, Emmanuel, they spend so much time in trying to explain the minimal details of our psychology or of the interaction between spirits. So that they put all the details so that we can understand that this is right and this is wrong. After we have that, when we acquire that knowledge, that loop becomes faster. We understand a little bit more. If we understand a little bit more, we can also understand ourselves a little bit more. And that helps with our moral transformation. Now, another thing that Kardec thought, since intellectual knowledge is so important, is it worth it to study science? At that time it was booming, everything was science. So is it worth it, since I already know that science on the other side, it's much more evolved. With our science, comparing to what we read in André Luiz's books, it's very flawed. It's very incomplete. So what's the point in studying all that? So that's what Kardec asks. Since the corporal life is only an ephemeral sojourn, or temporary state, in this world, and since our future life should be our principal concern, is it worthwhile to put forth the effort to acquire scientific knowledge that only bears upon material things and necessities? Absolutely. First, it enables you to help your brothers and sisters. If you have a good science professor, a good science teacher, it helps you a lot. It makes people happy that that person is helping them to understand nature or the laws or the way we see and decode the laws of God. For most people, or for those who really like, it's kind of a religious experiment or a religious experience to be able to understand and to see the beauty of nature. That's the true reason to studying science. It's not just for someone to say that, oh, I know a lot. The person who says that is in the very beginning of learning, or maybe not even there. Next, your spirit will evolve more quickly if it has progressed intellectually. So it helps us. It helps us to evolve. In the hiatus between incarnations, you will learn in 1 hour what would require years on earth. That's very good. That's very good to hear. No knowledge is useless. It all contributes in some degree to advancement because the perfect spirit must know everything. Since progress must be made in every sense, all acquired ideas help the development of the spirit. Even though when we discarnate, we're going to learn much faster, we're going to learn much more things, but it doesn't mean that just because I don't have a body anymore, I'm going to know everything instantaneously. No, we have to start somewhere. So studying here is also important. That doesn't mean that we all have to be doctors, we all have to be scientists. No, civilization only works if we have all professions. We all have our part, our duties in society. To study just that, or to be a scientist, is only one very small piece of it. We need everything else. So I brought here 4 examples, 4 people. We have Galileo, which was the guy who discovered that our small planet is not the center of the universe. It is not. It's just one more. You imagine how the impact that had in people's lives at that time. So we are just one more planet. So that immediately brings humbleness. We are not the center of the universe. It's just one more circulating, one more star. Then we have Isaac Newton. He was the guy who was able to calculate, to create a model that would give us the position of all the planets. Maxwell was the guy who created electromagnetism. We can only talk about propagation because of him. And then Einstein, when Newton created his model, there was one gap. We could not calculate precisely the orbit of Mercury. So that was fixed by Einstein. But then you can ask me, what does that has to do with Spiritism? Why are you showing this in a speech in a Spiritist house? All of those guys, or the theory that they developed, are used by the spirits to explain the interaction between spirits and the spiritual world. So when we read the books, they always refer to the knowledge that they gave us. So they help us, that this scientific knowledge helps us to understand better how God behaves, if I may say so. However, if those discoveries cannot make us better, cannot make us to become better people, they are useless. They are useless. Most of those people, those 4 I know for sure, they were religious people. So their science were always connected to religion. Maxwell was even teaching theology together with his electromagnetism. Other side. So why is that so important? Our faith. We are intelligent beings. Our faith has to agree with our reason. If I tell you that the Earth, our planet, is flat, doesn't move, and everything else rotates around it. And then you see, well, that's not what we see, that's not what we experiment. How can you have faith? How can you have faith on something that it doesn't agree with your reason? It doesn't agree with something that has to make sense to you. You cannot. We are intelligent beings. We need those two aspects. It needs to make sense to us. That's something that Kardec says over and over again in the Spirit's book and in the Medium's book. How do you know that what the Spirit is telling you is truth? It has to make sense. Always has to make sense. If it doesn't make sense, if there's an itch behind your ear and it's making you uncomfortable, then you don't need to accept it. You don't need to accept it. It has to make sense. And in order to make sense, we need to develop intellectually too. So this is a part from the Gospel according to Spiritism, and it says, since God has given them, people, intelligence in order to understand and to guide them in the things of heaven and earth, He wants their faith to be rational. And it is at this point that the lamp should not be put under a bushel. For without the light of reason, faith grows weak. Nevertheless, as I said before, in this part of the book, Changing Attitudes from Hamed, he stresses the importance of that other block that I showed in the diagram, intuition, or intuitive perception. Distorted ways to see sexuality, religion, marriage, races, and professions takes us further and further apart from reality and of situations and creatures we live with. Before this, let's try to attune our spiritual vision, for our intuitive perception it's broader than the physical one. So we need to quiet ourselves and not and allow for us to develop intellectually, but we also need to hear our intuition. There is an essay in the Spirit's book right after the questions and answers from the spirits about spiritual perception, how the spirits see, hear, as they don't have ears anymore, they don't need eyes. And then Kardec writes an essay, kind of a summary of everything he learned from the spirits. And there he says that when we discarnate, we absorb the signals with our whole body. It's not just with our ears or eyes, it's with our whole perispirit. And more importantly, we can shut it off. We can choose what we want to hear and what we don't want to hear. But there's one thing that we cannot turn off. Nobody can, which is the inspiration of the high spirits. We can never turn off that voice of God. The lower spirits, they don't want to hear those spirits of light. They don't want to hear about Jesus. They don't want to hear about forgiveness. They like to stay where they are, to continue doing what they want to. So they may not want to listen to those spirits that come from the colony, but the higher spirits, they cannot. They will always have that pain in their head, the conscience. They will always have that. We cannot turn that off. And that's our intuition that also helps us to understand what we are doing. So, we understand the intellectual part. We understand that this is important for us to transform morally. We understand the intuition. It's very important. So let us apply a little bit of the intellectual endeavor, and let's see one of the worst vices that we have. The root of everything else. Kardec was a very curious guy and very smart too, so he asked all those questions beforehand. We have all that in the Spiritist book. So he asked the spirits, of all vices, which may we regard as the root? And the spirits tell him, we have already told you many times, selfishness. All evil derives from it. Study all the vices and you will see that selfishness is at the bottom of them all. It neutralizes all qualities. But why is that? We are meant to share this world. We are meant to help each other, to be happy together. We are meant to be together, all of us. It's not by chance that we live in a world with 7 billion people. We are meant to be together. The thing is that we think too much in ourselves. We think too much in what is good for us, and we disregard what is good for my brother or my sister. When we start thinking a little further ahead, not just about ourselves, but about the others who are around us, almost immediately our vices, they start fading. Because they are all related to selfishness. To the sole thinking of myself, my needs, not the needs of the person who is right beside me. When we forget that we are supposed to be always together, and even if you don't want to, we are always interacting and learning from each other. When we forget this main thing of our nature is when the suffering begins. So I have a few examples of connection between selfishness and other vices or problems that we go through. So we have jealousy, drugs, greed, anger. When we talk about jealousy, what is the connection between jealousy and selfishness? Well, it's very clear. When I'm being selfish, I'm not thinking the happiness of the person who I love. I'm thinking only in my own immaturity and insecurity. I'm thinking only about myself. I'm not thinking the happiness of that person. And this is something very, I don't want to say stupid, but it's useless. We all have protections, instinctive protection against someone who wants to take away our free will. We all have that. We have an inner force that protects us, protects our free will. So we can stay with a person who encloses us, who wants to know every single step that we have, or every single step that we take, every single place that we go, and we can take that for a while. But after a while, we raise our shield and we protect ourselves, and we explode. Because our free will is very important, and nobody has the right to take it away from us. So in that way, the person who was afraid to lose the other one creates the situation exactly for that to happen. So that's why jealousy is useless and it's completely selfish. Drugs. Any drug. We are thinking only in our own chemically induced happiness. We are not thinking the impact that will give in our family, in our children, in our sister, in our brother. So we don't think about the suffering that we cause in the ones who love us. Or the fact that I receive this life and I'm not using it. So again, selfishness. Greed, that is very clear. I receive a lot of money or I receive the opportunities to get all that money and I use only for myself, for my own pleasures. So what is the point? Even though we may acquire a lot of money from our own hard work, we were given a good brain, we were given health, we were given the situations that allowed us to work hard in it. So we were helped to get that amount, that financial situation. So we have the duty to help others too. That doesn't mean that I'm going to the corner and here's $100 bill, another $100 bill. That's also useless. There's always ways. Before that. And the last one, anger. That is very important. We live under the illusion that the others are better than us. That we are better than the others. So then, they don't have the right to tell us anything. But we are the best ones. That's also selfishness. And because we have that illusion, we get angry. We get protective when people dares to tell us that we are wrong. There was, in 2012, there was a speech from Divaldo in Bahia about aggressivity. Just about that. He spoke for an hour. And it's so soothing to hear him speak, because he talks from his heart, and he's a very good person. So he delivers a very good energy. So it's everything's so clear when he explains to us. I don't know why we forget, but when he says, it's so clear. And he tells us that we need to understand that the other people that make us angry, they are like us. They make mistakes too. And we need to be more fraternal and not confrontational. Instead of confront the person, we can be fraternal. There's always a situation, there's always something else that we can say. Instead of pointing the finger, what are you doing? What are you thinking? There's always something else that we can say. We can be fraternal. If the other person doesn't understand, it's not our problem, it's their problem. When we see the example of this in the books, Psychograph by Chico Xavier or Emmanuel, we see those criminals, those guys that really terrible spirits. They kill so many people, and then the spirits, the high spirits, they come to talk to that spirit, the very evil one. They are never confrontational. Hello, my brother. How are you? I can see that you're doing better today. So that's the only way to get to people. If we are confrontational, people protect themselves because we have ego. So they protect themselves and they don't hear anything and everything goes south. They're terrible. So the anger is also connected to selfishness. If you think more about the other person, even though we are angry at them, the situation has a better outcome. So actually, if we think, love is the only way. Love one another. Even though sometimes it's hard. But that's the answer for everything. It makes our lives easier. Then we get, again, to forgiveness. Again, from changing attitudes. So forgiveness, instead of reading, I'm going to explain it. It frees us, as I said before. It's the only way for us to be free. If we forgive all the time, it's the only way for us to be happy. So this is also an important understanding of Spiritism doctrine. And after we understand all that, we can start working ourselves and understand, why am I not forgiving? Why do I have to make that small situations that offended us alive? We keep thinking about that. We don't forget, as the message in the beginning. We keep it alive. And that makes us relive that situation over and over and over again. And that's not the behavior of a free person. If we are not free, if we don't transform ourselves, we are not useful. The only ones who can work like Jesus did, like so many others did, it's for us to be free. Free for our own vices. Our vices are like shackles that tied us to a world where evil is still very common. If we want to be free, we need to transform ourselves from inside out. But how to do that? How do we do this? Well, first is the understanding that we are having here. And there's another technique that was brought to us by a former priest, a philosopher, a very good man, which is cited in several religions, Saint Augustine. In the Spirit's book, when Kardec asks, what is the most effective means for improving ourselves in this life and resisting the draw of evil? The draw of evil that we all feel. A sage, wise man of antiquity, has told you, know thyself. How do we do that? And there is a small part in the end of the chapter where St. Augustine says what he used to do. Do what I used to do when I was living on the earth. At the end of each day, I examined my conscience, review what I had done, and ask myself whether or not I had failed to fulfill some duty, and whether or not anyone might have had reason to complain about me. So it's a review that he used to do every day, in the end of the day. Did I upset someone? If I did, was it my fault? What could I have done differently? So this is a very important thing and helps us a lot. We cannot change what makes us suffer if we don't know what is wrong inside of us. So that's the intellectual endeavor. But this technique helps us to join the intellectual knowledge with our moral knowledge. But what is a moral knowledge? What is a moral individual? Another question by Kardec. By what signs can we recognize in individuals the real progress that will raise their spirits within the spirit hierarchy? The spirit proves its progress when all the actions of its corporal life consists in practicing the law of God, and when it understands the spirit life beforehand. So there's another key part there. Understanding the spiritual life beforehand. So we are here now. We are incarnate. There are others here who are discarnate, but talking about us. If we really strive to understand what are the spiritual values right now, right here. We are in our trial. We are being tried now, tested. When we do this exercise and use this opportunity to be better, to try to be better every day, when we arrive in the other side, we'll see that we're going to be much lighter, much happier. We don't even need to get to the other side, even here now. It takes a long time for us to have our victories, our small victories. But every single one that we have, today someone told me something and I didn't say anything back. And I was able to forgive, at least a little bit. That small victory already makes us feel better. Even though it's really small, but if you keep adding them, you keep feeling better and better and better and better and better and better. And we keep freeing ourselves from the suffering. close our talk here today, I bring this message from Emmanuel in the book Our Daily Bread. Beyond the earth, the blessings of the Lord radiate in the celestial heights. However, one must possess light to perceive them. The law states that divine identifies with what is divine, for no one can contemplate heaven by sheltering hell in their heart. So why do we need to transform ourselves morally? That's the whole point. Why do we need to go through all the trouble to have that fight inside of me that comes from the will to change? When we read about the colonies in the books of André Luiz, when we read about No Solar and the other colonies in the other books, don't we want to be there? Don't we want to live there? When we talk about the transition of our planet from trials and atonements to a regeneration world, where we are going to respect each other, there will be trials, but it will be little ones. There won't be wars anymore. Don't we want to live there too? Don't we want to participate in the transition? We don't want to go anywhere else. We want to stay here. If this planet is going to a better place, I want to be there too. So we all want that. We want to be happy. And that only depends on our moral transformation. That is why it's necessary. It's not because someone is telling you to change yourself. It's because we want to be happier. We want to live in a better place. So that is why we need to try to change ourselves little by little. It's not going to be tomorrow or the day before, but every day, even though it seems that we don't change, we do change. We do change. We have interactions with people every single day. Every interaction is a new chance for us to do better. People outside our families, inside our families. We are all here in a new trial. So this is our chance to get our place in a happy place. Okay? And the good news is we are all going to get there. All of us. We will get there. It might take some time. It might be faster for one. It might take longer for others. But we will get there. All of us. None of us will be left behind. None of us. We'll all get there. And the fact that we are all here today, it already tells us that we are in the right path. We are trying. With the same force that we apply in changing, we also have to apply the same intensity in understanding that we need to be patient with ourselves. We're not going to change from day to night. But we are all going to get there. This is already very good thinking. We'll get there. And we will someday be in a much better place. Much happier, at peace. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rafael. We're now going to be opening for questions or comments. No questions, no comments? Sure, you have a question or a comment.
So,
See?
you said that knowledge is a prerequisite for transformation. Or as spiritists, we also know that with knowledge comes accountability. We're children. We don't want to grow up to be responsible. We don't want to know. So many spirits avoid knowledge because they are afraid of the accountability. If that's us, how do we change that?
Oh, you want me to answer? Okay. I was thinking, how am I going to do that? Well, actually it's easy intellectually, but it's harder to do on practice. if we develop ourselves intellectually and we already know what is wrong and what is right, we really have to do exactly what we know is right and what is wrong. It is going to take a long time. We know already. Since if we already have that knowledge, what happens is that little voice of intuition, it gets stronger. Because now it has a higher base. If you steal something, you already know that's wrong. Everybody knows that stealing is wrong. But then that person doesn't acknowledge that we have a life before this one, that we are eternal beings. So whatever I do now, I'm gonna die and nothing's gonna happen. That person, when that person is thinking that, they already know it's wrong, but they still force that thought. So then they steal, they use that money, whatever they want. But then they develop, even though if they don't want to, as Joe was saying, that we want to remain ignorant because I want to keep stealing. It's easy, I don't have to work. I just wait for that person to work, they get something, I'll go there and grab it. So even if we don't want to change, something is going to happen and that person will be exposed to the truth. No, you don't live only once. You're going to come back here. And more, there is a cause and effect law. Whatever you do is going to go back to you. So then, from that point on, the intuition will ache more in that person's head. So that person will have a conscience that will be hurting more, because it was hurting before. We all know what is right or wrong. But after we understand something new, it seems that that pain increases in intensity. And it only goes away when we start behaving exactly the way we know is right. In that case, just stop stealing. Don't steal anymore. So that's kind of an easier case. A harder case is start forgiving. That's harder. But what we have to do is, day by day, we try to do a little bit better. So I couldn't forgive everything yesterday, and I feel really bad about it. I said things that I didn't want to. I hurt the other person because I got angry. But then a new day starts, and we wake up in the morning, and we try to do better. That situation will come back. There will be another person that will tell you something similar, and you have a new opportunity to forgive. Mm-hmm. And then you don't have it again. You can't forgive. There will be another day. And that's our walk, day by day, trying to be better. And one day, we will.
Yep. We all have the blueprint of perfect beings in us. So it is that ache that we are talking about is the suffering that we know when we do something wrong, because we do have that in our conscience, in our blueprint. This is what is going to be stopping us from repeating, because we are the ones who suffers the most. So it gets to a point that I don't want to suffer anymore. So I don't want to be ignorant anymore, because the ignorance is really getting me to a point of exhaustion, of suffering. And this is when we try to learn, what can I do so I don't suffer? What can I do not to avoid the pain that I feel every time that I do something? Or sometimes we cannot even acknowledge that we are doing something wrong, but we can feel that something it's not right, and we are suffering from that. So I think it's because of that blueprint that God created us with perfect beings that take us into that moral progress, because it's the moral progress is the that is going to lead us to that spiritual perfect beings. So any more questions? Okay, one more question.
So I was watching a video some 2 days ago, and it was basically from a guy that talks about politics and so on. And he is very well versed with in terms of politics, economics, all the things that we were discussing, like intellectually. And one of his in this video was basically about his religious perspective or his vision in terms of religion, right? And he was very, very specific, saying that he doesn't believe in God, and he thinks that this is the life he's going to live, and that's it. And what my question is, what happens with someone like this who is very well versed? He knows everything in his field, but he's really completely against everything God taught. We learned this. Is it going to hurt more to this person? How will he evolve morally? That's probably a hard question.
Thank you for the question. I think about that very often. I live in the scientific world and among scientists, and they all have very strong materialistic views. And I learned something. When a person tells you they don't believe God, sometimes they are saying that they don't believe in the label that we have created that means God. But I have got in contact with very important people that love what they do, and for them what they're doing is a religious experience. So they don't believe that if you say God, they immediately imagine a very old guy that punishes everybody, that makes everybody be afraid of him. So then he said, no, I don't believe this. But when they explain their meaning or how they see life, you see, that's the same thing, man. But you don't say anything. And they are very kind people. There was even a professor, physics professor, Nobel laureate, very smart, very famous. There was a student that came to him. He wanted very much to learn physics. And this professor told him, learn to love. That's the most important thing. Physics comes later. Learn to love. So that person was not religious. He's just a physicist. But he had that. So if that person goes to the other side and say, oh yeah, I'm going to live again, there's something else here. If that person is a good person, it doesn't matter. They are going to learn this very fast. Like St. Augustine, it says in the Spiritist book that he also didn't believe in a few things that we talk about today, reincarnation and things like that. But when he went to the other side, everything became clear. Sometimes we are just, we are fogged by this body.
Yeah.
And the processing of the information using a very heavy, fleshly brain.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter. All that matters is how that person behaves. If that person is a good person, it doesn't matter if they say they don't believe in God.
Givaldo Pereira Franco answered. He was given an interview to Jô Soares, which is a Brazilian talk show, late night talk show, and he said something about an atheist. What did he say? Does anyone remember?
I did.
Yeah, he said that he prefers to see an atheist that's not a hypocrite, right? It's not a hypocrite person, someone that practices good, than some religious person that actually is just religious but don't practice.
Okay, can you say? He prefers to see an atheist that is not a hypocrite than a religious person who is not with hypocrisy, right?
I'd rather have a honest atheist than a hypocrite religious person.
There you go. So it was, he answered more or less your question. It doesn't matter if the person doesn't believe in God, but she's acting as, as a child of God, because this is what she has in them, which is love and understanding and care for other people. Well, thank you so much. Is there any question from the web? No questions. Thank you so much for watching us today. We are now going to have our healing pass, not healing passes, our passes. Be it could be healing too. But we are going to have our passes now, so we're going to turn down the lights for those who come here for the first time. That's what we do. And I'm going to call